Hey everybody, I'm Christopher McSweeney.
And I'm Tim Shabanowitz. And we're here with doing lesson 16. We're going to talk about typography today. As usual, why don't you take a look at the quote? We'll come back to you in about 17 seconds. Aha.
Gotcha.
There's nothing really to read here. There is actually an important reason why we have this quote up here. You might notice it for your certain word processing platforms on your computer that this shows up when you're placing text. It's kind of gibberish, but it's really there to show you kind of what text could look like. So it's just sample placement text, so you can kind of see what text looks like on a page or on a document or on a visual that you're creating. So there is a reason for it.
Absolutely. In fact, Nemo Rem Dixit, who this quote is not attributed to. None of this is, I mean, the lorem ipsum, blah, blah, blah. That is for real, right?
Right.
If you're writing a book and you put in a text box, it'll just fill it with that.
Right.
Nemo Rem Dixit, I actually went to the Latin teacher and I said, I need a name of somebody who doesn't exist. And so Nemo means nobody. And then Rem Dixit is basically like the verb of like said anything.
Nobody said anything. Ah,
Yeah.
clever.
So, hey,
clever
you know,
Latin teachers.
Sometimes get a little creative and have some fun with it. So, yeah, you don't really need to reflect on this quote, except for the fact that we do use it as a placeholder.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes
You need placeholders.
you need placeholders instead of having emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's check out this next page. If I can go to the next page. There it is.
Good
All
job.
right. Typography, huge in design because what we want to do is we want to create consistency across the entire design,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in my classroom currently right now, the same font that I use in my laser etched elements around my room
Mm-hmm.
is the same font that I use in my book.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would you want to do something like that?
I want students to see the stuff on the walls and
Mm-hmm.
connect it to the book, and I want them to realize that it's the same thing.
That makes sense. I mean, it's correlated to each other for sure.
Yeah. So when we see this, really this is for you guys to look through, see different styles of justifications, of
What justifications? What do you mean justifications?
Okay,
Like-
justification. So is it on the left side?
Okay.
Does it start on the right, like pushed to the right
Okay,
side, or is it
yeah.
in the middle?
Okay. Got it.
Or is it fully justified and it fills out that whole text box?
That does matter because then you have negative space that you may or may not know what to do with.
Yeah. And luckily, word processors at this point will fill that in for you as you type.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are different types of what we call typefaces, where you have a serif.
Mm-hmm.
Serif.
Serif.
Serif has little teeth.
Serif is a tooth. Okay. Got it.
And then sans serif literally means without a serif.
Without teeth.
Without teeth.
Yes.
So not
So
that serif-
fancy versus non-fancy. Is
Yeah,
what we're going
right.
with. Yeah.
Currently, as of 2023, really the past few years have been known by sans serif fonts because there is a little bit for ADA. Do you know what ADA is?
Yes, the Americans with Disability Act
Yep.
that we use in architecture all the time.
Absolutely. So ADA made a recommendation that said, hey, if you're going to use different fonts, sans serif is easier to read for people with reading disabilities.
Yeah, yeah.
Reading
We see this.
challenges.
We see this in the school right now. Like teachers should be giving out sans serif text to students just to even the playing field out so everyone can read very easily. That's cool.
Yeah, in fact, Apple and Microsoft and stuff is moving away from the default being Times New Roman font.
I love Times New Roman.
I know.
It's great. I know, but
Hey, that's the traditionalist old schoolness.
Yeah.
That's a serif font, and now it defaults to like Helvetica or something like that. That's
Yeah.
a sans
Arial
serif.
probably.
Arial,
Yeah, that's
yep.
it. Yep.
Also, there is decorative font. I use decorative font usually for whenever I'm trying to call attention. So sometimes in my book, I'll use a decorative font for when Quacky El Pato, Quacky the Duck, is talking. So then, like, my students will see, like, this is something distinct from a notes page.
Right. So should when you get the decorative fonts, I know students will really like using those because there's a plethora of those. But should they really use something like wingdings or so? Why?
Use sparingly
Okay.
the decorative font. Imagine decorating a room.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put decorations everywhere, then it becomes crowded.
Right.
And you lose.
I gotcha. Yeah. And it doesn't feel special.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So what you want to really work on is finding a continuity between all the different elements of your font, right? You don't want to have like 17 different fonts because it'll get distracting. And you want to use the fonts to really point out and highlight where you want your readers to go.
Got it.
Okay, so if it's signage or something like that, then that needs to be really clear. If it's a sign and it's in like 12-point font and you can only read it from 2 inches away, well, that's not a helpful sign.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Makes sense.
When we talk about pairing, that is where you go between the different font styles of a serif versus a sans serif.
Oh, so it's like little families of certain types of typeface that relate to each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, like in this one on the left-hand side, you can see that the body is typed with a sans serif, and then the little pop-out quote and stuff like that. Or sorry, it does have a serif, and then the pop-out quote also has a serif, but the title is a sans serif. So if you kind of look at that, it does help balance each other out without looking weird.
Yeah.
Hierarchy, we do want to talk about that. That is actually most programs now will give you a hierarchy where it's title, subtitle, body, caption, and typically the people who have put those together have spent a lot of time researching that. I create my own. In this book, we use the same font throughout with different title styles and things like that.
I'm going to say that usually selecting typeface or typography usually seems like an afterthought. Like everyone kind of resorts to the default mode, what's out there. So being intentional with the type of text that you put out there in the world is critical for making your room stand out or whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. All this is really important. All of these little things are important too, like the weight. Is it bold? Is it light? Ultralight? They all do different things. Ultralight has become really popular. It does struggle with readability sometimes, but it does look very clean. It's that clean aesthetic.
Right.
And then the contrast is, I love using contrast. So you can see where it says hierarchy, and then the right below that, the subtitle is a contrasting with a black background with a white font.
Yeah, and it's smaller text, but it's still just as important above everything else.
And it's the same font as well.
Yeah.
So all of those, super important. If we go to the next page, by the way, spend some time really digging into this and finding your own style when it comes to typography. These next couple pages are literally just tons of different fonts. Okay.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So you can see that like sometimes it's not that big of a deal to change the font, but sometimes it does.
Yes. You need to look at how long a sentence is, how short a sentence is it readable, not readable, etc.
Yeah. And we've mixed in serif, sans serif, and decorative all throughout this. The sentence, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy brown dog. I think I have brown in there twice. That is a sentence that shows all of the letters of the alphabet. So you'll see that a lot when you're looking at type fonts and stuff like that.
Yeah, you see what everything looks like, for sure.
Absolutely. Before we get into that, you have something to add about architecture, because typography to me is the typeface, the font.
Right. And when we were talking about this, putting it in the book, the word in architecture that I always think about is the word typology, which is kind of like typography, but I think we're getting at the same thing. So if you're making a book or putting stuff on a wall, you want the typeface and the typography to match. But if you're designing spaces, you want to share a certain type of typology where you have a shared theme. Things relate to each other. So typology is kind of like grouping buildings or spaces together so that that you can identify them. You can label it something. That's what we're trying to do here when we're redesigning this space. So just remember that don't have something that's just totally disconnected in your room, something that does not relate. Group things, form a typology, and move on.
Are you saying be intentional?
Possibly. Yes, of course. Be intentional. Don't just throw stuff out there for the sake of throwing it out there. It all has to relate to each other.
Awesome. And we do have a DoD today. Yeah.
Yes. This is a fun building. This one has got a lot of different typography and does not fit in the typology of the area at all, which makes it fun. It's the Pompidou Center by Renzo Piano. It's in Paris, France. If you take a look at the pictures, you'll be like, I've never seen a building like this before, but it is fun. And it does, like I said, it does not fit into the neighborhood, the urban fabric. So it messes with the typology and typography and all that kind of stuff.
So sometimes things that don't fit in stand out, and you want to do that sometimes.
That would be called emphasis.
Ooh,
that's a principle.
Principle design. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, make sure you take some time really digging into this to find your style, but as we learned in the client interaction video, to kind of meld that with what your client's expectations are and assumptions and all that. We want to make sure we're communicating really well.
Yeah.
And we hope this video helps, and good luck.
We'll see you on the next one.